Okay, we're back. It's October. It's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I have a very special guest, Rhonda Shabazz. Okay, what
Woo-hoo.
is your what is your job title?
So my first job title is that I'm Jalen's mom.
Yes.
Um, and my second job title that I get paid for is I am the Victim Advocate Program Manager on Fort Hood in Texas.
Okay, and what does that mean? What exactly do you do?
So basically, our office handles all victims of domestic violence. We assist them with anything from safety moves, threat to life moves. We help them with getting civilian protective orders, military protective orders. We assist them with emergency food if they need it. We assist them with getting into our local shelter, which is Families in Crisis. We can assist them with landlord kind of issues if they're trying to move for safety reasons to get out of their lease. So just a variety of different things, but those are some of the main things that we kind of assist with.
Yeah, that was actually a lot of stuff, which makes me think that it must be hard to get out of those situations, right? If there's that many things that you can potentially help them with, without the help, it would be hard to get out of that situation. So what normally stops someone from getting out of those situations? What do they normally need the most help with?
Um, our population for the military is very unique in that
Mhm.
we do a lot of things on the installation that doesn't happen outside of the installation. So, for instance, if you are a domestic violence on a military installation, you have people who can assist you with getting a portion of a service member's BAH, which is their basic housing allowance,
Mhm.
so that you can continue to, have some source of income to provide for you and your family, right? So if you
Yeah.
separate, you're able to get that. If you were on the outside, then you'd have to go through like a court system to be able to get any type of spousal support or any type of child support as it relates to if you have children or not. So that's kind of different for the military. And then with the military, of course, we can get commanders involved. So unlike the civilian population who know their bosses don't necessarily get involved in domestic violence incidents, and most of the time they may not even know that their employee has been arrested due to domestic violence or something like that, unless
Mhm.
a background check happens and they happen to get that kind of information. But if you're on a job that doesn't require you to have a big background check necessarily, you might not ever know that one of your employees is dealing with this kind of thing. Whereas on a military installation, we're going to get every service member who has probably been arrested by law enforcement or had any contact with law enforcement, both on the installation and off the installation.
So so to deal with these victims, do they don't have to come forward, or do they have to come to you and ask for help?
So the good thing about, again, when you're dealing with our military population, we have what we call a restricted report, and then we have a non-restricted report, right?
Mhm.
So you can basically talk with a victim advocate and receive a restricted report. That means it's between you and the victim advocate. It might be between you, the victim advocate, and your healthcare provider, who's also in that chain of being a restricted report. So we can restrict your information just to a very select few people, right?
Mhm.
And we still can assist you with some things. Now, there are some things where if a victim wanted a civilian protective order, then you can't really, if law enforcement is involved, you can't have a restricted report. But if
Mhm.
law enforcement is not involved, you had an incident with a service member and you wanted a way out without having to deal with the service member, then we can assist in a limited scope of things there. And then of course we have our non-restricted report. So you can say, I want everybody involved. I want chain of command involved. I want law enforcement involved. I want healthcare involved, I want a victim advocate, you can do that as well. So they have two options on the installation.
Okay. I mean, the restricted report is really good because I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
do more people do restricted reports?
No, we have our percentage of restricted reports are very limited, mainly because a lot of times we get our victims, law enforcement has already been involved. So
That
once
makes
law
sense.
enforcement is involved or once command is involved, then it no longer can be restricted, because the whole point of restricted really is that very limited people know about what's happening, and we're
Right.
still trying to assist the victim in that. But once the community is involved and everybody knows it, based on law enforcement involvement and all of that, then there is no point in having a restricted report.
That makes sense.
And then, of course, if there is child abuse involved in that, then it kind of limits the opportunity to have a restricted report, because child abuse is one of the things that has to be reported. We are mandated reporters when it comes to children.
That makes sense. So with the job that you have and the stuff that you deal with on a daily basis, what do you see and what do you deal with that you think maybe other people don't know? Like, what kind of insights can you give us about domestic violence?
So here's what we know. On average, per minute, there are 24 individuals per minute who is either being physically abused, raped, or stalked. 24 people per minute, which is 12 million people a year.
Yeah.
So it's a lot, right?
Right.
Oftentimes what we hear like all these other different awareness months, and people get really, really involved in a lot of awareness months. Let's take breast cancer, for instance. We share that same month with breast cancer awareness. And both of them are equally important, but most of the time, I think people don't want to get involved on the domestic violence side because they feel like it's not their business, but they will get involved on a breast cancer awareness side because there's no implications to that for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we deal with that as it relates to victims as well, because victims feel like nobody cares. Nobody cares about what they're going through. It's really hard for a lot of victims to get the services they need without jumping through hoops. We have like a program sometimes that we take the community through. It's Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, where you read like a scenario on a card, and it asks you, do you want to go to this station or do you want to go to that station? Then you make a decision. Okay, we're going to report it to the police. So you get to the police and you report, and then you get another card that says, well, the police at this point cannot make an arrest due to this. What do you want to do? Go back home, or do you want to go to this step? So it takes them through this step that victims have to go through in order to even receive the basic help. And sometimes it is a matter of wanting to just go back home because it's more stressful to go through all the steps and the red tapes to get the assistance. And sometimes people feel like they should just go back home and not deal with it.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's the fear aspect too, right? I mean, if you're dealing with someone that's violent, the more stuff that you do and you end up back in that position anyway, it's going to be worse for you. So I'm sure it'll be pretty easy to give up and just go back home, right?
Yeah, so fear is a big reason. We know that on average, it takes a victim 7 times to be put in a violent situation before they make a decision to leave. So 7 times. So when you see that a person has left for a final time, think about how many times something happened prior to them even making that decision. So that's just on average, 7 times. An incident will happen 7 times, and usually it progressively is getting worse. And then they make that decision.
Yeah, I think that's really hard for people to understand, the fear aspect and just the complexity of it all. Because you look on the outside and you're like, why don't you just leave? But
exactly,
and
fear goes with everything. Fear goes with the emotional side of it. Fear goes with the financial side of it. Fear goes with everything. So everything, in its totality makes you fearful. Not one thing makes you fearful, but you're thinking about your children. If you have children involved, you're thinking about the fact that maybe you were a stay-at-home mother or father, and then you have no source of financial stability. You may have special needs children who have specific doctors. And so you start to care more about something else than you do yourself. So the fear of not having something for your children keeps you in a situation more than the fear of you actually leaving that person.
That makes a lot of sense, especially, the children thing. People do a lot of things for their children, right? And sacrifice
Correct.
themselves. So,
Right.
and so what do you tell someone? Like if you had to give advice or whatever to someone that's, not going to be directly in your program, how do you prevent these things from happening, or what can you do once you're already there? How can you encourage them to, what do you tell them?
So, we try to start off with the prevention aspect of everything, teaching people what a healthy relationship looks like. So our program has both the prevention side and the treatment side. So once something has already happened. So on the prevention side of it, we have relationship classes, we have parenting classes, we have all of these things where we try to get people to, get involved on that side of it so that they don't end up on the treatment side. But when someone is actually in the midst of their situation, we are there really to make sure that they are safe. So that's the first thing that we're talking to them about. We do a lethality assessment in which we try to figure out like what environment are they really in? How safe are they? Or should we be worried more than what we are? So based on that lethality assessment, that will depend on what we might say or what we might do or encourage a victim to do at that point. So we know that no matter really what we say, because remember, we got that on average, it takes 7 times for them to finally, walk away from a situation. So if we're getting them on the first time, we have this cycle of abuse where it's the tension building phase where the tension starts to build up and then the explosion happens. So whatever it is, strangulation, if it's a physical, if it's emotional, whatever that is, then that happens, right? And then shortly after that, we have what we call the honeymoon phase. So then in the honeymoon phase, you got folks who want to go to church with you and, they're claiming God at this time and they're never going to do it again. And they're doing all the things that you've asked them to do, prior to that event happening. And then of course, after that honeymoon phase, we go back to the cycle again of building up to the tension. And then of course, then we have the explosive phase again. And that cycle just kind of keeps happening. And some people get stuck over in the honeymoon phase because then they start to remember that surely this is a person, this is a good person.
Yeah.
Some people are saying, this is the father of my children. Like, surely I was not so blinded by something to not be able to see that this was a bad person. So then it becomes a reflection of really who you are. At least that's what people think, victims think, that am I a bad person for choosing this person when they have nothing to do with that person? It really is about someone who wants power and control. That's what it's about. So there will be people who will say, oh no, they have anger issues or they were this, they have all these excuses. But the reality is, anger, if you can control it in some situations, but you don't control it in other situations, that is not the same thing as domestic violence. So if you can control your anger while you're at work and you don't slap the shit out of your boss, then you don't have to do that to your spouse, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's what we always tell everybody. This is really not about anger. This is about power and control. This is someone who wants some type of power and control over someone. They know that they can do it, so they do it.
That makes sense. You do hear that a lot. I do hear victims of domestic violence say, he has anger problems, or like what you were saying earlier, he's actually a good person. He just needs blah, blah, blah. I mean, But like I
Right.
said earlier, I think that's the complexity of it. We're just looking at two people that we don't know, and we're like, obviously, if he slaps you, he's not a good person. But to them, they're just like, nah, I've seen him do like 100 good things, and so
Mhm.
just
Right.
made a mistake or 10 mistakes,
Right.
So,
And then, sometimes you have family involved. And so
mhm.
when you are listening to, let's say, a mother's cry about their child, like, just help him out or just help her out. She needs this or he needs this, or they love you. I know that they love you. All of these surrounding things also contribute to why victims stay in those relationships, because you
Mhm.
have other entities who are not giving you the real support that you need.
Right.
So you tend to break down, because really it's really about someone attacking the essence of your soul, right? So
Mhm.
and you want to feel like you're a good person too. So it depends on if you are a religious person. People start to talk about forgiveness. What about forgiveness? People make mistakes, and that kind of thing. But we
Mhm.
encourage our victims to know that it's okay for someone to make a mistake, but you don't have to stay for them to correct their mistakes. You don't have to necessarily be the forgiver of someone who is putting you in an unsafe situation. That a
Mhm.
person, maybe they can heal, maybe they can get better. It just doesn't have to necessarily be with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no one is ever going to know that, which is why we never encourage a victim to stay in a relationship, because from our standpoint, we already know that it progressively gets worse.
Right. Oh, that was really insightful. What else you got for me? What else? What else do you know that maybe someone like me doesn't encounter on a daily basis?
So I'll ask you this question. What do you think the most lethal form of domestic violence is? If you had to say the most lethal form of domestic violence, what would you say it is?
As in the way that people are killed?
Right. Or just the situation of something happening and someone says that falls under domestic violence. What would you think is most lethal?
I mean, I don't know.
If I gave you a choice between a gun, strangulation, and a slap, or a closed fist,
I'm gonna
which one
say
would you?
I'm gonna say a slap or a closed fist.
And that would be the wrong answer.
What is
Our
it?
most lethal form of domestic violence is strangulation.
I was gonna pick that first. That's crazy though. That's crazy.
When I tell you that, because what happens is most victims, they look at it as choking, right? They'll say the person never hit them before. So then when we're doing the lethality
Ooh, I
assessment, we
have
ask
heard
that.
that before. I've heard a lot of women say, "Oh, he's never hit me. He just roughed me up. He just grabbed me."
And usually it's a grab, by the neck, which is what we call strangulation. Most people will refer to it as choking. But for the correct term, we're talking strangulation. And mainly because you can die from strangulation 2 days later
Really?
and not have the symptoms that a gunshot wound would give you, or a closed fist would give you. So you could not have any marks. You could not experience any physical effects of strangulation at that moment, which is what happens sometimes with victims. So when if they don't go to an emergency room immediately after, to get an actual exam where someone can actually do the special light that can see things that you wouldn't be able to see from the outside. That's why it's so detrimental. And so we always, when we hear strangulation, it is one of the things, strangulation and sexual assault is one of the things that we send immediately to our CID, which is Criminal Investigation Division. That's how serious it is. So
Oh.
we definitely want our victims to know that if you have been strangled, you are 7 times more likely to die by the hands of that abuser.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's actually crazy. I didn't know that. I genuinely didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'm learning all kinds of stuff. What else? What else? What else would I not know?
I have been watching this series on Netflix called The Maid.
The Maid.
And yep, it's called The Maid, MAID. And I started watching it not knowing what it was going to be about. But at the very beginning of it, it's about this girl who her spouse got so intoxicated that he punched a hole in the wall right next to her head, and he broke glass, and he did all of these things. She walked away from it, she ran away, should I say, from it. And when the domestic violence shelter encouraged her, or when the person that she went to encouraged her to fill out the forms for abuse, she kept saying, well, it's not abuse. I'm not abused. But intimidation is a form of abuse, right? And a lot of people don't see that as abuse, but it is a form of abuse. So when someone is, again, think about power and control. If someone intimidates you by pulling out a gun, although they didn't use it, that's an intimidation factor to let you know what I'm capable of doing.
Right.
And so she just kept referring to herself as not being abused, and she wouldn't want to take away a bed in the shelter from someone who was truly being abused. That's what we see with a lot of our victims. They don't know the severity of what situation they're in at that moment. And that's the scary part. That's the scary part. And then what happens is they get fed up, and then they say, I'm just going to leave. So whenever you decide to leave, then that's when you should be most cautious, most concerned, because at that point, when you have someone who is all about power and control, and you say, I'm leaving, that's where death comes. That's where most people, if you see some of the stories of victims who have been murdered by their intimate partner, you will hear the family say, that person was leaving them. That person was trying to get away. So once a victim is in the process of that, that's when we become our most cautious and concerned about them in that instance, because that's when it becomes serious. That's when we think about death in its truest form, because at that point, if you think about power and control, you're out.
You're about to lose it. Yeah.
You're about to lose at that point. So how do you win? You take somebody out, you take yourself out, you take kids out, all of that in their mind, you're still in control because you wiped it out for them.
That's deep.
So if you are out there and you are dealing with a victim, don't be so quick to just give your advice. Let them talk to people who do it on a daily basis, so that you don't make the mistake of, leave that person. You don't deserve this. And while they don't deserve it, you can't just leave. You do have to have a thought process about what it is to leave. What do you do? How do you keep yourself safe? Where do you store a key? A key. What kind of keywords do you have for your friends to know that you're in imminent danger? What's your call signal? Where will you go that person or their family has no access to? Right? You don't want to run to somebody's mom, of course, right? You don't want to run to your friends because they know who you're close to, right? And prayerfully at this point that they have not alienated you from all of your friends, because that's kind of how it starts. They start to eventually push you away further and further from the people who are closest to you, so that they then are the only person that you can depend on.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So you hear them become jealous of every little thing. And so in order not to argue about the jealousy of all of the foolishness, you just tend to kind of eventually spread apart from that person. Just not be around that person, because that person brings the craziness out in your partner.
Right.
And so then eventually what they do is alienate you from everybody that you love most, to include your parents, to include your friends, family, everybody.
That's tough. I mean, even thinking about all of those steps in that process, that's exhausting.
Right. It is. It's very exhausting. So then you have to think about that. So then when we talk about fear, it's always, that is a part of fear as well, because sometimes they threaten to hurt other people that you love, right? You have a brother, if you have a sister who loves you and cares about you and are looking out for you, then that person starts to threaten those people. If they do this, how about I shoot them too? How about I do this to them? How about, so then that becomes a part of the fear tactic as well. Because when you love somebody, you don't want to put them in harm's way because you've chosen to stay in a situation.
Right. It's sad.
No, it is really sad. It's really sad. But we know that it's out there. It's again, it's as prevalent as any other disease that is out there, that we should bring awareness to, more than just this month, right? More than that. We need to be thinking about this on a daily basis to try and combat some of the things that we can as individuals. Like, most of us will turn an eye to domestic violence, no matter who we are. There are a lot of people who are bystanders when it comes to that, because they think somehow someone else is either going to make the call or that it's none of their business. And oftentimes, because victims do go back to a situation, you have your neighbors and friends and families who just don't want to get involved because you keep going back.
Yeah,
but even if a person keeps going back, I'm saying make the call anyway. Even if it's anonymous, make the call anyway. Do something, intervene.
Who am I making the call to? Who am I calling?
You can make it just to your local police department. So if you're going to call them, they have to come out for something. They have to come out.
Okay, what about the thought that I might put them in danger, like we talked about? How do I convince myself that calling the police is the right thing, especially knowing that they don't be doing nothing sometimes? Just saying.
Well, I mean, they can only do what's within the law, right? So if they show up and you act like you're in love with someone and nothing happened and you have no idea what that was about, then of course they just can't take somebody off in handcuffs as a result of that. Which is, I really wish they would at this point. At this point, I really wish that if somebody called, that we would separate them immediately, right? Because it gives a victim time to think about the opportunity to walk away or to get to safety at that point. But if the police come and they know that there's not going to be an arrest, then it is hard for them to make a decision to leave, because if they pack up, they've got somebody there watching them pack up.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. It's a hard situation. So even if someone doesn't feel comfortable in calling law enforcement, figure out a way to know the habits maybe of the family that you might be living next door to, so that if the perpetrator is not there, maybe you can hand the victim something or let them know that, hey, if you are in distress, this is what you need to do to let me know you're in distress.
Okay.
Right? That's something. You don't necessarily have to call the police. You don't necessarily have to go over to someone's house, because that does put you in danger as well. So we're not asking for that either, but figure out a way where you can be helpful, whatever that is. So for instance, if you're listening to this podcast, you can say to a victim, from now on, if you guys are having a fight, don't go in the bathroom. You have no escape when you walk in the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Stay in an open area so that if it gets that bad, that you can have a good escape route.
That's
right?
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Put you an extra credit card somewhere else with a friend, with a family member, so that if you have to escape, that someone even if your family doesn't have money, at least you've saved something, or you put away something so that you can get a bus ticket, a Uber, or a cab, or whatever it is, to a temporary shelter. Find out what your local shelter is in the area so that you can give that information to a victim if they need it. Sometimes these victims don't know what's out there. Not everybody goes into their relationship saying, oh, I need to write down this resource for a victim advocacy because this can happen to me. They don't.
Yeah.
Right? So they have no idea who to call, when to call them, where they're located, or any of that. So they're usually calling and trying to figure out something in a crisis mode. And if you've ever been in a crisis, you know that your brain is not even functioning the way you need it to function. So you don't really know what to do at that time.
That makes sense.
And then depending on what state you're in, each state has different rules and laws in which they abide by. You need to know what your local gun policies are. And if you have weapons in your house, if the police do come and they ask you that question, tell them the truth. Don't lie and say you don't have a weapon, because that very weapon might be your demise.
Yeah. So
we want to make sure that you think in terms of safety all the time. Even if it means, if you have a spouse who's been drinking, and when they start drinking, they get abusive, whether it's verbally or physically, right? You know where your weapons are. Hide them in another place at that moment.
Yeah.
That's something that you can do to keep yourself protected in that way as well.
That's good advice. Good advice. Wow, you said a lot today. This is a lot more information than I expected. I really learned a lot, seriously. I don't know if you have more, but take everything.
I mean, this situation, when we talk about domestic violence, has so many components to it. And no one situation is ever the same. That's what we do know dealing with the victims. No one thing is ever the same. Some people have children involved. Some people don't have children involved. Some people are married. Some people are not married, right? In the military, our rules and regs are governed in a different way for a lot of things. And so, that population is a little different in how things are handled as well. But you can get civilian protective orders. You can go to the courthouse and file them yourself. You don't have to have an expensive lawyer or anything like that. And there are websites and places, and I'll make sure that I give you a few things that you can post maybe under the link, in your link whenever you post this, for victims. There are so many resources out there. You just have to be willing to take those resources. You have to be willing to put in the work. And that's really what it boils down to. We can do nothing of our own. We can only do what victims allow us to assist them in doing that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'll put it in the description. I'll put it in the description box under the video, or wherever else I'll post it. I'll post the links with it. And also, we didn't say this yet, but we have until the end of October to get to 12 million steps. So if you're watching this and you don't follow me on social media, we're walking for domestic violence awareness.
Oh, yep. We have the Purple Up Mile Challenge, where we're getting 12 million steps. And we're doing that throughout the month of October. If you walk already, you run already, you bike already, you Zumba already, if you cycle, whatever it is, you can calculate that into miles, send us those miles. We'll do what we need to do on our part. We'll put the link in the in the description so that you have that link. Send it to us, hashtag Purple Up for DV or hashtag 12 million steps. And it's just for us to bring awareness to domestic violence, not at any one place. Like I'm in Texas right now, but I have reached out to, numerous of folks that I know so that everybody can get involved in this awareness month. And throughout the remainder of the year, we plan on just bringing awareness throughout the year, all the time. 24/7 really is what it should be about. Each state that you're in, there is probably a crisis line. There is definitely a national domestic violence crisis line. We'll put that information also out there for you, that you can always call them. You can go online with them. They have a lot of helpful resources out there as well. Of course, if you're in the military community, there are some special compensation things that a victim advocate can assist you with, that you can reach out to a victim advocate to kind of assist you in that process if you are married to a service member. There are state crime victims compensations as well that each state has. So if you have been a victim of domestic violence, or really there's several crimes that fit under that category that you can receive compensation for as well.
Okay. Perfect. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Are we going to sing our song?
No. This is not the place to be singing songs.
Okay. Okay.
Try to embarrass me.
No, I'm not. I think the people want to hear you sing your song.
Nah, they definitely don't. I got a little cold. I can't sing like I normally sing, so they don't want to hear that. All right. Anything else?
I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. Just know that there are many organizations out there for those folks who are victims of domestic violence. We also report, of course, we're mandatory reporters for child abuse. So a lot of times we do have children that are involved, and know that this is one of those traumatizing experiences that kids take with them into their adulthood. And, of course, there is a lot of statistics out there about how children who were brought up in this type of environment are more prone to act out in the same way, or to become victimized as a result of it. So children see us, and they don't always do what we tell them to do, but they do what they see us doing.
Right.
So.
Makes perfect sense. That's true for everything, really.
Right. Right.
Okay.
So that's it.
I appreciate you being on here and spreading us awareness and giving us all this information, because like I said, I learned a lot today, and I felt like I knew a lot before, but now I feel like I didn't. But so maybe a lot of other people will feel like that, and maybe we'll have more empathy, and maybe we'll be able to help a lot more people with this information that you gave us. And are people allowed to, can they reach out to you personally and talk to you if they're
Let me say this, because you have quite a few followers.
Yeah, I don't know.
So do I want 10,000 people to contact me? And no, but we're going to put the resources in there. Now, if you are at Fort Hood, then of course, we are your people. But if you are at any other installation or any other state, we can get you to a state representative who can assist you with that. So if you call and say, can you help me find my person there? Or even if you call just to ask a general question, and I can do that, for sure. I'm always willing to be able to do that. My number is 254-287-3583. That is my work number. 254-287-3583.
I thought you was about to put your cell number. I was gonna say, I
No,
don't think
no,
that's a good idea, but
nope, nope,
okay.
that's my work number. So
Okay.
so
All right.
if there is a victim out there who had a question, I really don't care where they're from. If I can help them and answer that question, then I would do that for them.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. And you'll send me all of those resources so that I can put them in the description box.
Yes, most definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, why'd you turn your camera off?
I didn't. Sorry, my battery said low.
Oh, okay. That's a sign that we need to get off anyway. But, all right. Thanks for coming on the show. And I'm glad to see you again. Love you so much.
All right,
And
love you too.
I will talk to you later. Let me stop recording.